Welcome to the Genealogy Gems Podcast, providing quick and innovative ways to make the absolute most out of your research time and creative ideas for sharing and displaying your family history. I'm your host, Louise Cooke. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me for episode number 82 of the Genealogy Gems Podcast. Well, did you enjoy my interview with Lisa Kudrow in episode 81? As you know, Lisa starred on the TV show Friends for nearly a decade, and she's now co-producing and starring in the new genealogy-themed television show called Who Do You Think You Are?, which premieres on NBC. It's going to be on Friday, March 5th at 8 p.m. I hope that you have been sending all your friends and family a link to that podcast interview and telling them all about the show. I mean, wouldn't it be great if it were a huge hit and genealogy became even more popular? Who knows, maybe those relatives who kind of look at you cross-eyed when you're talking about family history will come back around and say, "Hey, I saw that show. Weren't you working on our family history?" And the floodgates will open. That's my hope. Wouldn't that be fun? I'll have a link directly to episode 81 in the show notes so that you can copy it and paste it into an email and send it out and get the ball rolling. Hopefully generate a lot of interest and viewership for the new Who Do You Think You Are TV series here in the U.S. There's been lots going on in the world of genealogy this last week. Let's see here. I've got some good news for you. Ancestry.com announced that they are going to be at the Southern California Genealogy Jamboree with their scanners, and that means that attendees will have the opportunity to have their family photos and documents professionally scanned at the conference for free. I had a chance to have this done when I visited Ancestry in January of this year, and it is really cool. The digitized images are so clear, and they're really, really high quality. I had some pages from a photo album from, when I was about 3 years old, scanned. And it was one of those albums, you know, the kind with the sticky pages where you don't dare remove the photographs because the whole thing's going to, rip apart. Well, I gave them the pages, and now when I pull them up off the flash drive they gave me, I can zoom in on those images and see things that I totally missed by just looking at the photographs themselves. It's really, really nice. So if you're going to be at the Jamboree this year, like I will, you can sign up for a 15-minute scanning session from noon on Friday, June 11th, through 3 p.m. on Sunday, June 13th. The scanning area is going to be in the producer room in the East Tower of the main hotel. So you just look for the signs when you get there that point the way. Now you're going to want to register in advance. So you need to do that at the Jamboree website so that they can plan ahead and figure out how much scanning that they're going to be doing. So you just go to 2010 Jamboree Scanning.eventbrite, which is BRITE.com. And then you'll sign up for your particular time slot when you actually arrive at the Jamboree. Also, there on the website is everything that you need to know about how to prepare your documents and photographs for scanning. And the neat thing is that the scanned files, again, are going to be saved to a thumb drive, which is provided by Ancestry.com, and they'll give that to you to keep. So it's pretty nifty. And speaking of conferences, I'm going to be speaking at the Ontario Genealogical Society Conference in Toronto, Canada. That's being held May 14th through the 16th of 2010 at the Doubletree by Hilton Hotel at the Toronto Airport. I'm so excited about attending this conference for the first time. This Canadian conference is not just for Canadians either, by the way. They are going to have some specialized streams of classes for Italian ancestry and Dutch ancestry and some terrific speakers that you've heard here on the podcast before, like Maureen Taylor, the photo detective, and Rick Kroom, who is one of the contributing editors over at Family Tree Magazine. So head to their website, torontofamilyhistory.org/2010, where you can browse the schedule and you can register in advance with their secure online registration with your credit card. Or you can download a PDF of the registration form and you can just mail that in or fax it in. And stay tuned to the podcast because I'm going to be featuring more of those genealogy experts who will be there at the OGS conference here on the podcast before May. So stay tuned. And I've got a press release here from the Library of Congress from January 29th of 2010. It's called Veterans History Project Marks 10th Year with Events and Initiatives. The Veterans History Project, known as the VHP at the Library of Congress American Folklife Center, has planned national and local events, activities, and initiatives during 2010 to mark the 10th anniversary of its congressional mandate to collect, preserve, and make accessible the personal accounts of American war veterans. VHP contributors have recorded and submitted more than 68,000 personal recollections to the library to date, making it the largest oral history collection in the United States. The project depends on a vast network of volunteers, both individuals and organizations, to record stories and submit original photographs, diaries, letters, and other personal documents that tell the history of our nation during wartime from the perspective of the men and the women who were there. Their plans for 2010 include a launch of a toolkit to help VHP contributors plan local events and develop community engagement programs, initiatives to gather more stories of minority and women veterans, events to mark the 65th anniversary of the end of World War II and the 60th anniversary of the beginning of the Korean War, and a host of online and in-person programs to mark Cultural Heritage Months. The Veterans Project was created in 2000 by Congress as a national documentation program of the American Folklife Center. You can find that at loc.gov/folklife. And again, it's to record, preserve, and make accessible the firsthand remembrances of American wartime veterans from World War I through the current conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, so that future generations may hear directly from veterans and better understand the realities of war. And volunteer interviewers may request information at V like Victor, OHP like Paul, at loc.gov, or you can call the toll-free message line at 888-371-5848. And of course, we got to check in with FamilySearch.org. They have announced some new record digitization projects. We love that. New records coming online. These are just getting started in the digitization process. They're working on some Italian records from Napoli, Italy, 1809 to 1936. Also, parish registers, 1837 to 1900 from Bristol in the UK. They're working on the 1920 federal census for Guam and Samoa in the U.S. And also 1910, the federal census, they're working on Kentucky, Maryland, and Massachusetts. And county marriages for Tennessee, 1790 to 1950. Now, this is just part A of an ongoing project. And finally, the 1920 federal census for the U.S. Virgin Islands. Okay, well, that's it for the news. Coming up next, we're going to hear from you at the mailbox. Well, we're here in the mailbox, and I have some emails. Gosh, lots of things to cover today. As you may recall, we've talked in episode number 80 about 3-ring binder dividers that are big enough to see past those sheet protectors, and I recommended some that I found online. Well, Cheryl Surplus of Flagstaff, Arizona wrote in recently on this topic as well. And Cheryl writes, I keep my family history in 3-ring binders also. For quite a few years, I've used Avery's Protect and tabbed sheet protectors. It's item number 74160 by Avery. It's a top-loading sheet protector with an attached tab to separate each section of the book, one for a family name, followed by additional dividers for each individual included in that section, and they've worked quite well. Since the dividers are also top-loading sheet protectors, I can put the family or the individual name on the tab for quick reference, but also insert a more descriptive divider sheet with, for instance, the name of the couple whose information appears in that section, along with their relationship to me and a simple family tree. The latter is helpful for someone looking at the book for the first time to be able to follow the line of descent. And a good refresher for me, too, when my research is jumping back and forth between families. You can also insert a photo or anything else to make the divider more interesting or informative. And she sent me along a basic example So I'll have a link for that in the show notes. And she says, the set I use has 5 tabs, but the package indicates there's also an 8-tab version, and that's Avery item number 74161. These are both more expensive than the dividers you mentioned on the show, but I thought I'd offer your listeners another option. Thanks again for your podcast, Lisa. Cheryl Surplus. So in the show notes, I'll have the details on these sheet protectors. I think it's kind of neat that not only does it have the tab built in, but then you can also add that sheet that kind of tells what's in this section. And again, I'll have an example that Cheryl sent me. Again, it's the Avery Protect and tabbed sheet protectors, and I'll have a link to those in the show notes. And I got an email from Al Wilson, who wrote in, I am just writing to say that I'm enjoying your podcast. It makes the train commuting time go quickly, but I do have to be careful I don't miss my stop. With your upgraded relationship with Ancestry.com, I wonder if you could do a podcast regarding dealing with them. While they are a juggernaut at providing new content, my interactions with them to resolving problems has been flat. I have 2 ancestors, Harry Leslie Stratton and Maurice Creamer Stratton in New Jersey, who have draft registration cards listed, but the images fail to load. It turns out that something is wrong with that entire section of New Jersey. When I told Ancestry.com about it, they indicated that they were aware of the problem, but didn't have any timetable for fixing it. I wonder if you have a suggestion on how to escalate the issue. Well, Al, I don't know if I have an upgraded relationship with Ancestry. I certainly have enjoyed a relationship with Ancestry in terms of them inviting me out to visit and kind of see for myself what goes on there, because that certainly helps out in talking about it on the show. But when it comes to escalating an issue with Ancestry, I don't know that I really have anything more than what you've already done. I can give you kind of a sense of what I learned from behind the scenes, though, and that is that they do have what appears to be a pretty good customer service center, kind of a call center of folks who answer the questions, and they do appear to have a process for escalating the issues, if you will. So when you call in, if you have a concern and you don't feel like you got the answer that you're looking for, you can ask to speak to their manager. And I actually saw the group of people who are kind of the next level in terms of escalation there at the call center. And I was assured by Tom Foster, who's the director of member services, who oversees that area, that those people are fully authorized to make any final decisions that need to be made in order to be of assistance to the person who's on the phone who's calling with the question. But of course, the problem is that the issue that you're having is one that really overlaps into the whole content area. And in terms of content, you know, they have this constant ongoing backlog that they're working on, things they're digitizing and all those projects. And I don't know, we didn't talk about it directly, but I imagine that once a project is uploaded and done, then they kind of move on to the next thing. But I think it's fair if you call into that call center and ask for the manager for that shift to talk to them on the phone. It seems to me that you'll definitely want to let them know about the issue. And, you know, I think one of the points that you could make, if it were me, would be to let them know, look, you know, sometimes we go in there and we use a trial, like a 14-day free trial or whatever that they offer, and you look to see if they have the kinds of things you're looking for. And if you see, oh, they have, you know, World War I draft registration cards, and you sign up and you pay that subscription fee, only find out that you can't get access to the ones that you need in New Jersey, then I think that's a fair gripe, if you will, and asking to have those done. And I would go so far as to even ask, could you specifically grab those couple and redo them? The truth is that those folks who are scanning documents, they're right there at the Provo location, and I don't see why they couldn't rescan them. But, you know, it's just me. It's just my opinion, but I know that they're there. Like anything else, I imagine it's a bit of that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So I would recommend giving them a call, asking to talk to the next level manager, letting them know that part of your decision to make the purchase for the subscription was that these draft cards were advertised as being online and available, and that you'd like to request that those specific ones that you're looking for be moved up the pile, if you will, to make sure that what they've advertised that is available is indeed available. So I hope that helps. I mean, that's kind of the approach I think I would take. The other option you have is that I do know that the managers there at Ancestry participate in and read the Ancestry blog. And the Ancestry blog is a place where a lot of folks go and make comments. And that opportunity to make comments on postings and propose questions and, in a sense, get a public forum for what your question or concern is, those things are monitored and are typically addressed, as far as I can see, by the managers there at Ancestry. Of course, you want to make your comments in a thoughtful way that's respectful to them, obviously. But I think that if you lay out your case and you make your specific request and your concerns about, the fact that those records are not available, I wouldn't be surprised if you actually got a response from that method. You may also trigger some other folks who are having the same issue but didn't feel very empowered to make mention of it or whatever. They may chime in. And of course, when you put out that request in public, it does give other people who are having the same issues the opportunity to chime in and say, hey, that applies to me as well. I'm having the same problem. And of course, that moves it up the ladder because then they're aware that there's more than one person being affected by the issue at hand. So those are my two suggestions. Call in and take that escalation route and post it on the Ancestry blog. So I hope that helps out. Let me know what the responses that you get, Al. I would love to hear how they're responding, because that was one of the things that they were communicating to us during the visit in January. I think that they're trying to listen more to customers, to communicate more. Certainly that was the purpose of having those of us who do blogging and podcasting come out and meet with them directly. And really, an issue like yours is kind of the proof of the pudding, isn't it? It's one thing to say it and it's another thing to do it. So I'm hopeful that they will do it. So give it a shot and then write back and let me know, okay? Great. Thanks so much for writing in, Al. And Michael Honeycutt wrote in saying he's been listening to the podcast for about 3 months now and that he listens also while he commutes, like Al does. He says, I've been sitting on the idea of a blog for several months and I had typed up a ton of posts and then put them on the back burner. A few days ago, after I listened to your live show, I started thinking about some of the ideas I've been kicking around and decided to sit down and create a blog and immediately post something. Half an hour later, I decided to finally go for it and registered a domain and moved my blog there. It's called Confessions of a 20-something Family Historian, and the ancestry is geneacentric.com, geneacentric.com. Michael says that the thing he loves about listening to the podcast is that something always pops up in his mind a few days after listening. As soon as I'm done typing this, I'm going to give the toolbar a test run. Well, thank you for writing, Michael. Your blog sounds intriguing, geneacentric.com, The Confessions of a 20-something Family Historian. And I'll have a link to Michael's blog in the show notes for this episode. And Michael, you really hit on the key. Sometimes you just have to sit down and do it, right? Just do it right then when you're thinking about it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be done, right? And speaking of the Genealogy Gems podcast toolbar, Tim Cox wrote in with a good idea for that toolbar. You know that I'm always interested in hearing what you'd like to see, because the whole point of developing the toolbar was to give you a free tool that you could use to make it easier to listen to the show while you're online. So no matter where you are, you have the media player there in the toolbar and you can listen to the show. And actually, the toolbar, I think, is the easiest way to listen. It's easier than dealing with iTunes. It's easier even than navigating your way to the show notes and playing the media player, but then you have to keep that window open. So this way, you've got the toolbar there. No matter where you go on the web, you can still listen to the episode that you're listening to. And of course, the toolbar also gives you some quick buttons to get to other places genealogically that you want to go. And it also gets quick communication out there to everybody via the alerts, which I love having that as an extra tool. In fact, all of you, your response to the toolbar has been so overwhelmingly positive that the company that I use to develop it has been really impressed at not only how many of you are using the toolbar, but also that you're using it whenever you're online. So they actually sent a camera crew over to my house last week to film a success profile of the Genealogy Gems podcast for their website. So a big thank you to all of you. I couldn't be happier that you're enjoying it so much. And of course, I'll let you know when that video is up online. But it was fun, and it was neat because they were saying, wow, your listeners really use that toolbar. And I said, well, hey, we're into genealogy, and I've been trying to put some good stuff on there to really make it a help to those who have it. Anyway, Tim wrote in to suggest that I add a quick way to access Amazon on the toolbar. He says that he shops at Amazon all the time, and he wants the podcast to get the referral credit for sending him. Well, as you know, when you access a website like Amazon through a link or an ad that's on our website, the free Genealogy Gems podcast gets credit for sending you there. And of course, the best part is it doesn't cost you anything. So you can just click this icon on the toolbar, and it takes you to a page on our site that you can then start your search. So Tim, thank you so much for looking out for the podcast and writing in with this great suggestion. I did what you suggested. I've converted the button that used to look kind of like a shopping cart on the toolbar, and I converted it to an Amazon logo. It looks like the letter A with a little squiggly under it. So now you can click that button, select Amazon, and it takes you to a page on the Genealogy Gems podcast website where you can start your Amazon search. There's an Amazon search box right there. So by starting there, then anything that you end up actually buying at the Amazon website financially helps out the free podcast. In fact, over time, I plan on adding some other links to that button as well. And any of those that you use will do the same thing. They help keep the podcast up and running. And of course, no additional cost to you. It's just one way to get there. So keep those great ideas coming, Tim. I really appreciate it. And thank you very, very much, all of you, for supporting the podcast. You guys are awesome. And if you haven't already gotten the toolbar, be sure and do so. Head to the show notes. There'll be a link there to download the free Genealogy Gems toolbar. And you'll want to do that soon because coming up in March, we are going to be having a new contest. I've got a brand new copy of Family Tree Magazine's CD, Passport to Europe. It includes how-to guides, language assistance, best research sources, full color maps, all kinds of great stuff. It's a wonderful compilation CD, and I'm going to be sending out an alert through the Genealogy Gems toolbar. So if you're a toolbar user, that alert will pop up on your screen, on your computer, and it will tell you how you can enter to win that Family Tree Magazine CD Passport to Europe. And here's an email from Paul Dunlop, who writes, I just came across your Genealogy Made Easy podcast, number 1. Get inspired and get started. That was the first episode of Family History Genealogy Made Easy. Paul says, I began really researching my family just before the holidays that just passed. My father passed in 2007, and I sensed I wanted to do something on these lines. But apart from gathering old photos from my mother, didn't really get into things until now. It's been helpful to listen to the beginning podcasts, choosing a database, etc. I have been flipping between Ancestry.com, where I built my first trees, and MyHeritage and Genes Reunited. The thrill of getting a new leaf in Ancestry or a new match somewhere else is difficult to put into words. Much as I fear, I have got the bug and I can't stop this. It was so great to hear my mom's reaction over the phone of some previously unknown aunts I may have come across through Ancestry through another member's tree. I'm in Florida. My mom is in Lancashire, England. I am a long way behind in the podcast, but downloading as we speak. Great show, Paul Dunlop. Well, thank you, Paul. That was the whole reason that I created the Family History Genealogy Made Easy podcast, to give beginners a step-by-step tutorial and to give more experienced researchers an in-depth refresher on all those genealogy research basics. Now, as I mentioned in the last episode, that podcast series is wrapping up. But there is a large catalog of almost 50 episodes there that will stay up on iTunes for the time being that should get you up and running full speed. After a year of producing that series, I'm kind of ready to shift gears and get more Genealogy Gems episodes out there, as well as some other new projects that I'm working on. So, you know me, I don't sit still too long, and I've always got something new that I want to do when it comes to family history. So thanks for writing in, and thank you so much for your kind words, Paul. I really do appreciate it. Barbara Starmans sent in an email. She writes, I've always enjoyed listening to the methodology episodes, especially the one about the genealogy research process with Mark Tucker. And Barbara's referring to Family History episode number 20. I've had his map pinned to my wall for quite some time and find it handy to refer to as I work. I've just migrated my data back to Roots Magic with the release of Roots Magic 4, and I'm enjoying the program more than ever now that it incorporates all the features I was looking for when I wandered away to another software program a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, my sources from my previous program did not migrate so well in the GEDCOM, and I've decided that it is easier to redo them all than to fix them. I have about 2,000 people in my database and probably an average of 7 or 8 events for each, with 1 to 2 sources or more for each event. Well, I guess you understand how many sources I'm recreating. However, the good part is that it is giving me the chance to redo them all following more exactly the citation methods from Evidence Explained, and I'm using the source detail comments field in Roots Magic 4 to write a brief comment on the quality of the source and any conflicting or collaborating sources for the event, conclusions, etc., like a mini research report, since printing that field is optional in the reports. The episode that you recorded with Mark Tucker happened to be the one I was listening to as I was mulling over my options on this whole source question and pushed me into redoing them all, complete with the analysis, so I'll hold you and Mark personally responsible as I struggle through this huge project. I've just had to scroll through the episode backlog I still have to listen to and can hardly wait to listen to them all. I see that you're covering blogs next, and on my list of things to do this year is to migrate my own blog, somewhat underutilized, from WordPress to my own website, so I look forward to hearing these episodes. Maybe it will inspire some reconstruction during the blog moving. Thanks for your great podcast, Barbara Starmans of Ontario, Canada. And you can read Barbara's blog. It's called Out of My Tree. I love these blog names. You guys are so creative. It's outofmytree.wordpress.com. And Barbara, if you do migrate it, if you send it over to another domain, let us know. We'll get it up here on the show so people can follow you there as well. And I will let Mark Tucker know that you are holding him responsible. But it sounds like responsible for a very good project, because redoing your sources, fine-tuning them, tightening them up is such an important thing to do. And the generations from now who look at your research are going to be so grateful that you took this time to document your resources and use those fields and kind of do that analysis right there in the sources, because gosh, that helps so much, doesn't it? And, sometimes we find we hit those brick walls, and you go back, and when you have that kind of data to look back over and think, what was I thinking back then? And maybe I've got something new to look at. It helps so much. And of course, you mentioned Roots Magic 4. They are a sponsor of this podcast and fantastic program. Absolutely. Those of you who haven't tried it, you should give it a try. Go to rootsmagic.com and download their free Roots Magic Essentials. It's a great way to test drive the product, and you're going to love it. You're going to love it like Barbara does. I know that I do, because they really have incorporated in this new version of Roots Magic 4. It's hard to believe that they find more features to add, but they really do, and it is the top-notch product for documenting all of your research. And because the folks who design Roots Magic 4 are genealogists themselves, they know what you're up against, and they know what they're looking for. And I know that Bruce Busby, who's the founder and president over there at Roots Magic, boy, he's really in touch with the folks. He listens to those who write comments on his blog. He's at every conference that I've ever been to. Bruce is there with Roots Magic and constantly listening to the users. I think Roots Magic 4 is a prime example of the kind of listening and the kind of expertise that Bruce can bring to the development of the product, that merge it all together and that gives us something that really hits the mark on what we're trying to do with our research. In fact, at the last Family History Expo I was at, Bruce was there along with Michael Booth. They were in the exhibit hall at the Roots Magic booth, and they were conducting classes. If you come to any of the expos or conferences where Roots Magic is going to be there in the exhibit hall, he's been offering a service where you can now sign up and attend these little mini class sessions right there in the exhibit hall. He had chairs set out, he had a screen, and you learn from the master. You're learning how to use Roots Magic right there and being able to interact and ask questions. And I saw people's eyes just lighting up because they were really getting a firsthand taste of what that product could do for them. You know how it is. You get a software product and you start working with it and you kind of end up getting comfortable with the key things that you know how to do, and you don't realize there's so much more that it can do for you to save you time and effort and heartache down the road, that's for sure. So if you are going to be attending any of the upcoming conferences and you see Roots Magic listed there in the exhibit hall, be sure and put them on your list to stop by the booth and see if you can't get in on some of those little mini classes because they're terrific. And of course, Bruce and Michael do both teach full-length classes at the Family History Expo, so you can always attend those as well. So as I say, it's really the best one out there. Roots Magic 4, you can check it out at rootsmagic.com. And again, be sure and try that free download of Roots Magic Essentials. Okay, well, we've got our first gem coming up right after this. Podcast listener Sharon left a comment on the episode number 80 show notes page, and she had some very nice words about my interview with Irene Johnson. She wrote, "Great interview. Irene is a fascinating woman, and I just loved listening to her. Her sense of humor is fabulous, and I just want to be her new best friend." Thanks so much, Lisa, for putting out such quality work for us to learn from and enjoy. I loved your live podcast, too. I just had so much fun catching up on those yesterday. It makes the workday so much more fun. And Jerry Springer, I have never been a fan, but I view him so differently today. Heart-wrenching, and I suggest a box of tissues when you're watching the videos. No, Jerry Springer wasn't on the podcast, but I think Sharon was referring to that live podcast episode that we did in episode 79. I was interviewing Anastasia Tyler of Ancestry.com, who was a guest on that live show. And she was talking about the new Who Do You Think You Are TV series and the fact that the original came out of the United Kingdom. And she was talking about specifically an episode featuring Jerry Springer. So I put the links in the show notes for episode number 79 to the entire episode of Who Do You Think You Are featuring Jerry Springer that's on YouTube. And it certainly does show a very different side of the talk show host. So if you want to check out what Sharon was talking about, head to the episode 79 notes and you'll find the links there for that video. And I totally agree with Sharon that Irene Johnson is a fascinating woman and would make a great best friend, wouldn't she? She's so much fun. Think how much fun you'd have doing research with Irene Johnson. Well, I certainly had a ton of fun chatting with her last month at the Family History Library in Salt Lake City, and I've got part 2 of that interview with her right now. What else can we find here at the library?
Do you know, we haven't even mentioned maps, and maps are always wonderful. British maps that are the ones I'm most familiar with, and they're outstanding, and they're in map cases of their own. Big flat things, big flat drawers, and they are well worth looking at. You need to study a little about maps before you go getting your little sticky fingers on those. But they are wonderful. So do a little research on maps, and then when you come here, we really have an excellent map collection.
Now, is that something where we're going to be pulling them out of the drawer ourselves, or do we need to be asking for assistance in getting them? Are they behind closed doors?
They're not behind closed doors. They're out on the floor in these big cases, and they're skinny little drawers, but they're wide. Mm-hmm. But you might want to ask someone to help you get them, because they're not something that you generally use, and so therefore you don't generally know how to access them. Mm-hmm. So you might ask someone for help with those.
And gazetteers, those are so often you need the gazetteer to help you determine which map you're looking for and that type of thing. So there's a wide range of...
Yeah, that's something different again. I had gazetteers on my desk all the time. I needed them, but... I
remember trying to find a town in again, East Prussia, and there were a couple of them by the same name, and we needed the gazetteer to get to the right one.
Specific locality,
and then you could pull the map that had that.
Yeah, because it was in a different part of the country entirely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, that's true. you really need to know where your town or village is before you look at a map. That's true, and you need a gazetteer for that. But that's geography, and you really need to understand the geography of a country before you ever get going into something. You see, England to me is quite simple.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, right. Germany gets more complicated.
Yes.
In fact, it gets very complicated. And then the same applies to most of your other European countries. And I guess you could say the same for England, because you've got many towns, villages of the same name, and they're spread all over the country. To me, Australia's quite simple in that regard, although every state has towns with the same name too. But anyway...
So much of genealogy is about locality, isn't it?
Is.
It's kind of a hand in hand. You can't think you're going to do one without the other.
That's right, and that's where people go astray in identifying families, because they latch onto a family in one place, and it's the wrong place, so therefore it's the wrong family. And I don't want to discourage people, though, by getting into this too deeply. You have to be careful. You have to be very careful with your research. Make sure you document everything and follow the trail very carefully.
And documenting, like you said, the sources of where you're getting the information.
From.
Particularly if you aren't photocopying and you're just handwriting it on something, boy, you really still need to turn and look at the spine.
Yes.
Like you said, photocopy the front page.
Yes.
So many tips, and you've learned these. When did you first start doing your genealogy research?
When I was 18.
What prompted that?
I grew up without any relatives except my mother and father and my 3 sisters. I never had any aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, nothing. And there is that hunger in you to know more. And my parents, of course, being married in Germany at the end of World War II, even during that time, had to prove they were not Jewish. And so they had to have certificates up to yin yang. And they had this little old box. And the certificates were folded so much they were almost falling apart. And I remember being on the floor of the living room on my hands and knees and putting these carefully on the floor so that they wouldn't be torn, and trying to make sense of who fit where. Who are my mother's parents, and who are my father's parents, and who are the grandparents? And it was such a deep yearning to know. And where did they come from? And thank goodness I'd had Latin in school, and I could read my father's certificates and some of my mother's, because I knew enough German to understand. And I've always had that hunger, because I didn't know the people.
My family's very much the same. It's very, very small in terms of immediate relatives. And boy, it's awful nice to find out that you're not alone. There's a whole lot more others out there.
Well, my father had a brother who went to Canada. And when I went to Canada, I got to meet them, and I've got cousins there. They're real. They're flesh and blood, and I'm still in touch with them, and it's wonderful. And my Canadian cousins have kept in touch with the ones still in the Ukraine, because my father came from a very large family. But my mother's family, they were scattered in the war, and she doesn't know what happened to them. Well, she had one brother that came here to Salt Lake, and I tracked him down, his family. But it's so sad when they are scattered and you don't know them. At least I think it is. I think most of us have a yearning to know. There are some people that don't. But I always wonder what's wrong with them.
Maybe just not yet. It can hit you at different times, can't it?
Eventually, and as they get older. And I have 2 sisters who have no desire to know anything of the family, and even of each other. And I think that is absolutely appalling. But I think as they get even older, they're quite a bit younger than I am, but I think as they get older and their husbands die and they had no children, I think they will start to feel the loneliness. Mm-hmm. I really do. And I think that's so sad. Yeah. And that will be sad for them when it hits them.
Yeah. And not only do you, I guess, find your ancestors, but you do make some nice friends along the way, don't you?
Oh, you do.
Yeah.
Oh, you do.
Can't be lonely being a genealogist.
No, I have met the most wonderful people through genealogy. I really have. And people who have wanted to adopt me. And, I think that's just marvelous. They'd like to have me as their daughter. And I think, how nice. And I'd love to have them as parents. It's just been wonderful. It really has. And it's such a warmth. I don't know how else to put it. It's been absolutely soul satisfying and
that's a wonderful way to put it. I like that.
It is. They are soul brothers and sisters and parents and whatever else you want to call them. Mm-hmm. They are. Mm-hmm.
And you have children. You have sons,
yes.
Is that correct?
We adopt. I could never have children, so we adopted a girl and 2 boys, and the boys are wonderful. It's a tremendous, and we have wonderful daughters-in-law and a terrific son-in-law, and couldn't ask for better.
And grandchildren now. We were just comparing grandchildren notes now that I've joined the club. Tell us how many.
And we have 6 little ones and some older ones, and it's a joy and a delight. It really is. And the little ones just come and put their arms around you and hug you to pieces and give you kisses and nuggles, and it couldn't be better. It couldn't be better. It's a joy and a delight. It really is. It isn't always easy, but it's worth it. And we have a heritage to leave them. And our children all know they're adopted, and we have tried to help them when they want to know their birth lines. In some cases, we know their birth lines and so on, and we know the birth mothers, and so we've helped them with that. But it's always an interesting experience learning your ancestry, and I strongly encourage people to get to know their heritage.
Because even with your adopted children, so much of the heritage and the people that you came from shaped your personality. They've been impacted by that. So whether we're blood or not, we are impacted by those people that came before.
Yes, always. I've got Ukrainian things to pass on to my children, even though they don't have a drop of Ukrainian blood in their ancestry. Mm-hmm. There are still traditions and things I want to pass on to them. And they smile and they say, "Okay, Mom." And I think this is great. I think they ought to. I am the way I am because of my heritage, and I pass those things along, and I'm glad to say that they accept them, so that's good. And my grandkids do too, and they're cute, so
they get to hear the stories,
yes,
and
yes,
more to pass it on.
Yes.
Well, I think you've been a wonderful inspiration to all of us, and to know that there is so much more to learn, and that we can come to a big, huge facility like this and not be intimidated, but embrace it and know that they want to help.
Oh, don't be intimidated.
And so we can,
Don't. If you are, then it's because you're not opening your mouth and asking the questions. Ask the questions. Yeah. Don't be afraid. And if the first person doesn't answer you sufficient to your needs, then ask somebody else. And if that one doesn't, then ask somebody else. And keep asking till you find the answer you need. Somebody will have the answer, believe me.
Well, I am glad that you've allowed me to ask some questions today. And I have to say, we've gotten to know each other a little bit over Facebook, which is a wonderful another way for people to connect up. And I thought, should I ask Irene if she could meet with me, because I'm coming into town? And you were so wonderful. You were like, of course. And this has just been a joy and a pleasure. Thank you so much for meeting up with me here today and for spending some time with my listeners, because I know they've had a wonderful time.
Oh, thank you very much for inviting me. I've loved every bit of it because I enjoy people and I love genealogy too, in case you can't tell.
Well, Irene was terrific. She's right. Don't be afraid. Ask the questions. Such key advice for family historians. And if you really enjoyed this conversation with her, obviously she's just got years and years of wonderful experience there at the Family History Library. You might want to consider becoming a premium member, because I have a special section of that interview just for premium members on the Premium Podcast. In Premium episode number 40, Irene gives us literally a checklist. Everything that you need, everything that you need to keep in mind when you visit the Family History Library. But really, it applies to any visit. When you're doing an on-site research visit and you're going to a public library or the National Archives, wherever you're going, there are just key things, kind of a checklist of things to not only bring with you, but to keep in mind, things that you want to accomplish while you're there. And it's a terrific segment of the interview. So that's on Genealogy Gems Premium episode number 40.
Profile America, Sunday, February 21st. The telephone had only been around for 2 years when a problem arose. As more and more homes and businesses installed phones, no one knew who had them and what their numbers were. The first telephone directory in the U.S. was published on this day in 1878 in New Haven, Connecticut. It wasn't a big list. There were only 50 subscribers. A little later, a directory also came out in San Francisco with about 170 names. Today, nationwide directory assistants and online directories are commonly used. But a new problem has emerged. Should there be a universal directory for cell phones, and how would it be created? There are 270 million Americans with cell phones, close to 9 out of every 10 people in the country. You can find these and more facts about America from the U.S. Census Bureau, conducting the 2010 census beginning April 1st.
Well, according to the Old Telephone Books website, Alexander Graham Bell was granted a patent on his telephone in 1876. He demonstrated it to the visitors of the Philadelphia Centennial Exposition that same year. And of course, in early 1878, he installed the first telephone exchange in New Haven, Connecticut. The first telephone book, actually just a single 14 centimeter by 21 centimeter sheet, was issued in New Haven in 1878. By the way, a New Haven telephone book issued later in 1878 containing numerous pages and including advertisements sold at auction in 2008 for $170,500. This was supposedly the first telephone book with more than one sheet of paper. Well, you can see that first telephone book for yourself and the transcribed list of telephone subscribers in New Haven, Connecticut in 1878 at their website at oldtelephonebooks.com/pages/first_phone_book. And I'll have that link for you in the show notes. Thanks so much for joining me for episode number 82 of the Genealogy Gems Podcast. Covered lots of great stuff. Hope you had a good time. I'm going to be heading out this week to the Family History Expo in St. George, Utah. You can still make that conference if you want to. Head to familyhistoryexpos.com. I think it's FHExpos.com. You can register, or you can actually show up on Friday, February 26th of 2010, and you can sign up right there at the door if you want to. I'll be there teaching Google classes, a goldmine of genealogy gems, and of course the new Google Earth for genealogy. I'm really looking forward to that. If you are there, stop by the Genealogy Gems podcast booth, say hi, and looking forward to seeing all of you. And of course, to stay in touch all year long, be sure and sign up for the Genealogy Gems e-newsletter. You can head to genealogygems.tv and click on the sign up for the newsletter button. It's over there in the left-hand column where the menu is. And you can sign up there and get all the newsletters with what's coming up in the podcast, links to the blog articles, and of course, extra gems that we love to include in the newsletter. And as always, you can get in touch with me at genealogygemspodcast@gmail.com. Love receiving your emails and comments. And of course, you can leave a comment on the voicemail line, 925-272-5787. 4021. Well, as always, thanks so much for listening, friend. I'll talk to you soon.